wasn't he? That was what he done. Yeah, he's been up.
Right. Well, what I want to discuss with you today is just simply one poem, a poem of William Blake's, his poem London. Blake was, of course, a Londoner himself, and this is one way in which he saw his own city. We'll see at the end it wasn't the only way he saw London. I think you'll feel it's a very literal poem, but although it's a literal poem, at the same time it's a symbolic poem because London is also one part of the human condition. So let's have the poem. I wander through each chartered street, near where the chartered Thames does flow, and mark in every face I meet marks of weakness, marks of woe. In every cry of every man, in every infant's cry of fear, in every voice, in every ban, the mind-forged manacles I hear. How the chimney sweepers cry, every blackening church appalls, and the hapless soldier's sigh runs in blood down palace walls. But most, through midnight streets, I hear how the youthful harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear and blights with plagues the marriage hearse. Well, the poem was engraved in 1793. It's one of the songs of experience which he was writing over the previous 2 or 3 years. And the songs of innocence had, of course, been engraved about 4 years before, in 1789. And there's a sense in which the 2 volumes are complementary. In fact, he brings them together as a single volume in 1794 and show, as he put on the title page of the double volume, the contrary states of the human soul. So the innocence poems and the experience poems are, in a sense, dialectical, complementary parts, showing not just barren paradoxes or opposites, but contraries which themselves, when taken together, reveal perhaps another truth. Now, Blake himself was 36 when the Songs of Experience were engraved. He was an engraver and a poet. He probably came from some kind of small dissenting background. He was, in these years, very radical or Jacobinical, a supporter of the Jacobinical edge of the French Revolution. He was a professional man, not a very successful professional man. And between, of course, the Songs of Innocence and the Songs of Experience, the French Revolution had taken place, and in England itself, Tom Paine's Rights of Man had been published. You had had the beginnings of the popular societies for reform, like the London Corresponding Society. Each poem was engraved with a separate design, engraved by Blake and his wife. We've got London here. You see there's an old man being led by a child, probably down the street, and down on the bottom right-hand side you have a small boy warming his hands before a fire. How was the poem written? Now, this is a question we'd always like to know about with great poems, and we're exceptionally fortunate in this case, because there is in the British Museum the notebook known as the Rosetti Notebook, because Dante Gabriel Rossetti got hold of it in a rather extraordinary way in the mid-19th century. You see here the vigorous drawing in the middle with the writings round it. This is just an example of one of the pages. You see that obviously he'd done some of the drawings in the notebook before, and then he didn't want to obliterate it when he was writing in it, jotting in it, writing around the edges of it. He used this book for more than 2 years, more than 20 years. He used it for fair copies. He used it for memoranda about his engraving. He used it for jokes. He used it for working through the drafts of his poems. There again you have another page, and there you've got a page in which you've got what's almost certainly a self-portrait of Blake himself. Once again you see he doesn't want to obliterate it. He's writing round the edges. Here we have the page that interests us most. This is the page on which the draft of London appears. You see that it's one of about 4 or 5 poems on that page. London itself is up on the left-hand corner, and we'll look at it more closely and see how he has been revising it. It looks rather as if it was, in a sense, a fairly well-drafted poem in the first 3 verses by the time he wrote it down. He's been changing words here and there. But when we come to the 4th verse, he's had an awful lot of difficulty. The 4th verse has been added later, and is going down there in the middle between 2 other poems. And what you see there is, in fact, 2 drafts. There's 2 attempts at the 4th verse, and then there's another attempt at the very bottom where he's starting once again to try and get it right. So this is the verse that he had most difficulty with. And down at the right-hand bottom corner of the page, it's very interesting to see that there is an advanced draft of perhaps the most famous poem in the Songs of Experience, Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright. So he was working very much at the same kind of time upon London and upon the Tiger. Well, now, let's go straight away to the draft and see what light it throws on the finished poem. I'll read you the first verse of the poem as it appeared in draft. I wander through each dirty street, near where the dirty Thames does flow. And then it goes on very much as it is in the final version. And see, deleted, and mark in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe. Well, the first problem that interests us, I think it's perhaps not a big one, you think, but why did he change dirty, which he started off with, to this word chartered? I wander through each chartered street, which is what he did in the end. It's a bit of a puzzle, because the word, of course, perhaps didn't have quite the same meaning in those days as it does for us now. Does anyone have a notion on this? My notion, yes.
Well, I had a look at where Blake lived, and he lived near Silver Street and Golden Square. And he would be surrounded, or very near to the places where all the chartered companies had their headquarters. And I took this change that you mention to result from his desire, or the intuition that he had, that this evil that he saw in London was not so much a question of dirt as of something of the condition of society at the time. It seems to me that he's pointing straight away at a monetary economy. I don't know whether he would understand it in those terms, but he had an intuition that that's what it was. I should think so.
I think that's a very good suggestion. Does anyone else want to come in on that? Or yes.
It's a very sort of restrictive and legalistic phrase,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes.
Which would
Yeah.
get his back up, one suspects.
The same kind of point.
Yeah, indeed.
I think we can confirm, this, because it so happens again he was working on other bits in his notebook which he didn't publish in Songs of Experience, and we've got a fragment which is writing about the same time. I'll just read it you. Why should I care for the men of Thames, or the cheating waves of chartered streams, or shrink at the little blasts of fear that the hireling blows into my ear? Though born on the cheating banks of Thames, though his waters bathe my infant limbs, the Ohio shall wash his stains from me. I was born a slave, but I go to be free. It's difficult to decipher this one, but that's more or less what I think he was saying. So here again, this word chartered is used, and one of his editors suggests, well, he decided not to go on with that poem. He took the word chartered out and put it into the London poem instead. But charter here, as you say, goes with the words cheating, the sense of hireling, this sense of a world that's polluted somehow by commerce, and it's contrasted with the freedom of the person, the slave, as it were, of London, who might escape to the Ohio. And I put this together with a more political illusion, which is that Tom Paine and the Painites, the Jacobins in the early 1790s, one of their main targets was closed corporations with their charters, which were attempting, as it were, to monopolize or carve up little bits of the wealth of the world and exclude other people from it. So one of the Jacobin cries is against the closed nature of a corporation or a charter, or indeed the East India Company, which had a monopolistic charter which was just coming up for renewal, and the ships of the East India Company were, in fact, of course, coming into the Thames constantly. Anyway, we can't prove this, but clearly, you're right, the word belongs somewhere to this monetary kind of world. Look, in the first verse, I don't know if there's anything else that we want to look at, but I do think it's interesting, this triple repetition of Mark. He didn't have to use it. He started off and see in every face, but it became mark in every face I meet, marks of weakness, marks of woe. Anyone a notion on this? Probably because it's such an obvious one, no one would rush forward with it, but it is, I think, yes, subliminally the Mark of Cain. I mean, this is what is suggested. By the triple repetition of Mark, you have this sense of the Mark of Cain being introduced at a certain part of your mind. And of course, for Blake, who had a very unusual, affirmative type of radical Christianity, the Mark of Cain was also the mark of the forgiveness of sins, because if a man sinned, it was a mark that insisted upon forgiveness. That might be putting something there that isn't wholly evident. Well, verse 2. Here, there isn't really very much change from the first draft, except for one very interesting thing. The first version of the last line had originally been the German forged links I hear. And that became the mind-forged manacles. And this is a puzzle. Anyone got a notion about this? Why did he first think of German-forged links?
Well, I suppose in the first instance it would be perhaps a rude reference to the House of Hanover ruling in England. Perhaps in the more recondite form, it would be a reference, do you think, to the War of the First Coalition, where the
this is getting almost too learned for us. I mean, I think with the first suggestion, you're there straight away. I mean, I think you're there straight away with the Hanoverian Association.
Yeah.
It is a Hanoverian monarchy, and indeed there is talk going on at the time of using Hanoverian troops to keep down the British populace and British radicals at home, so that in that sense, perhaps Blake's first meaning was rather clearly political. But he wasn't satisfied with it. He didn't want to make, just as it were, a narrow political point, and so he changes it to mind-forged links, mind-forged manacles. Now, I think there's another clue here in the fragments he was writing in the notebook at the same time. There's a very interesting fragment he wrote, and he never published. Love to faults is always blind, always is to joy inclined, lawless, winged, and unconfined, and breaks all chains from every mind. Right, there are manacles, you see, are chains. Love is antagonistic to these manacles. What are the chains? Well, the second verse goes on to suggest deceit to secrecy, confined, closed up like that. Modish, prudish, and confined, He didn't like that. He struck it out and instead put lawful, cautious, and refined, to everything but interest blind, and forges fetters for the mind. Well, this is rather like Yeats. You know, in Blake you move from one point to another. Cumulatively they explain each other. Here in this fragment we've got some explanation of what the mind-forged manacles are, and they're manacles of law, of repression, hypocrisy, deceit, self-interest, and in this sense they're harder to break than the manacles of the German king and his mercenaries, because they're partly self-imposed. We impose upon ourselves these manacles of self-interest and deceit. There's only one other point in verse 2, but it is a difficult one, which is why bands, in every voice, in every ban, aye, the mind-forged manacles. There are a lot of meanings given in the dictionary to ban. Obviously prohibition. It sometimes is used as curse or execration. Any other advances on this? Any other suggestions?
Well, it also rhymes extremely well with man, doesn't it?
Okay, all right, yes, fair enough. It does, yes. You know, if one...
Forbidding the bands. Are you thinking of forbidding the bands, perhaps?
Forbidding, yes, it is a prohibitive word. However you use it, it's a prohibitive word, prohibitions. And there's also, of course, the bans before marriage.
Yes.
And this could well have been in his mind as well. And I think that it's a very evocative word. It's one of these words which has deliberate ambiguities and runs through all the ones we've suggested. And above all, it's prohibitive. It is a thou shalt not word. And if there is any sort of central clue to Blake, it is that his ethic is an affirmative. Thou shalt love. And what he is opposed to is thou shalt not writ over the door. So this, I think, comes in here. Well, verse 3. Here, of course, we've got an allusion to the chimney sweeper, who's in another of the songs of experience. Remember, God and his priest and king, who make up a heaven of our misery, the way that one ends. Here we've got only one change, a small one. He started off, how the chimney sweeper's cry blackens o'er the church's walls, and he changed it to how the chimney sweeper's cry every blackening church appalls. Well, I think this is an unusual use of the word appall, but it's one you find in other writing of the time, an active use of the word. That is, it ought to appall. It puts to shame. It is an active sort of word. In the same way as the sigh of the soldier actively indicts the palace. It runs in blood down palace walls. And in a sense, I would say this is a way in which he physically attaches to the church moral responsibility in the exploitation of young children, as he attaches to the state and the monarchy responsibility for war in these extraordinarily compact images. And it's real blood and it's real childhood, but it's also apocalyptic in the sense that it gives you a feeling of a Europe torn by revolution. Well, that was rather much the way I thought of verse 3, because it's verse 4 that really presents us with the problem. Blake seems to have felt, okay, he had got it, and then felt he needed something more. And he went on to writing this fourth verse with several attempts. One of the attempts ran like this: but most through wintry streets I hear how the midnight harlot's curse blasts the newborn infant's tear and smites with plagues the marriage hearth. And there's another fragment of this time, which he called an ancient proverb. Remove away that blackening church, remove away that marriage hearse, remove away... Well, he started off with that place of blood, which might well have been Tyburn, the place of capital punishment, and changed it to that man of blood the old radical way of referring to the king. If you do all those three things, you'll quite remove the ancient curse. Well, what is this marriage hearse? I mean, it's odd. Anyone got an idea on this? Why couple these two words in this sort of way?
Well, it's a death to freedom, isn't it?
Yes.
Marriage, the bonds of marriage are...
In this sense, yes.
I can't think of anything else.
Why blights with plagues and blast the newborn infant's tear? Anyone?
Well, while you've got sex commercially exploited like that, how can you... The one excludes the other, in a way, I think.
He seems to see commercial sex, prostitution, as the other side of the coin of possessive marriage, in a way.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think this is very true.
There's also a possible literal meaning of disease.
Well, I think you're right.
Transmitted.
I think you're right. I think this, again, Blake operates on two levels. Literally, he is referring to venereal disease. There's quite a lot of discussion of venereal disease at this time. That is, of course, the blindness following venereal disease. But at the same time, it's symbolic in the way that you've been suggesting, that he is talking about the nature of love and its possessive blasting or plaguing as well. Well, I wondered if I could try and pull this together then. We've gone through and seen why he's changed some of these words. And I think the point that you made right at the beginning about this being a money economy is one I'd like to take up as well. Although first, how is the poem organized in a very literal way? I think it's interesting to see the way you move through your senses. You start off by seeing, I marks of weakness, and in the second verse you're beginning to hear the street cries in London. When you come to the third verse, it's more than hearing. You're hearing sighs, but you have this sense of blood, and you're having this sense of the chimney sweeper's efforts. And when you come to the final verse, then life and love itself are at stake. So you're moving into an ever-deepening sort of appreciation through the senses of this picture. But in a symbolic sense, the things we picked up all hang together in another way. Starting off with a commercial buying and selling world of chartered in the first verse, we move on to the buying and selling of childhood, the chimney sweeper, the buying and selling almost of life, although buying and selling isn't so prominent there in the soldier, the buying and selling of love, the source of life, in the harlot. So that this is not just, you see, a straightforward picture about London, it is also an analysis. It is also a way of exposing what is at the heart of the disease as he sees London in this way. It's not just a catalogue of abuses and suffering, it's a cumulative sort of picture. Well, this is the way I see the poem, but someone here might disagree very strongly, or felt I'd very much stressed sides of it and left out others.
Could I go back to the two mentions of the word chartered?
Yeah.
I find a link between the use of that word in the first verse and the last verse from what you've said after.
Yeah.
It's very much a life and death thing. Marriage, we've talked about it being bonded, but in a way it ought to be a life thing. It ought to be a growing, not only for the partners, but for the children that come through it. But the city itself holds them back in the same way. So if I come back to the word chartered, a chartered street is a man-made thing and is a crippling thing. Yet the Thames seems to charter itself and is a growing thing.
I
might be.
You think the Thames falls out of this general pattern?
I just wonder if it's a playing off of the word between a life ideal in Chartered Street and a death ideal. death in Charter Street and life in Chartered Thames.
Yes. Well, yeah, there's a lot of room. I think you could also have my East India Company and so on and so forth who are using the Chartered Thames in that sense. I certainly agree with this sense of death at the end, that it is not only goods that are being bought and sold, it is, at the end, beauty, life, and the source of life that are being bought and sold, that you come through to an entire sense of negation. But we shouldn't, of course, take this way, which is very much, in this poem, I think, an analysis of, or a very bitter exposure and analysis of property values and possessive values as the only way in which Blake saw. Because, of course, he is such a many-faceted man that there are so many other windows upon experience that he has. And even London he could see in a quite different way. And there are poems, one or two of them written rather later, in which he sees London not as sort of Babylon, the city of destruction, you know, in the apocalypse, but as the possible utopia, the Jerusalem, the city of lost innocence, or which might regain its innocence and become the new city in which man could find spiritual unity again. I can't read the whole poem. It comes from his long poem, Jerusalem, but just 3 or 4 verses. The fields from Islington to Marybone, to Primrose Hill and St. John's Wood, were builded over with pillars of gold, and there Jerusalem's pillars stood. Pancras and Kentish town repose among her golden pillars high, among her golden arches which shine upon the starry sky. The Jew's harp house and the green man, the ponds where boys to bathe delight, the fields of cows by Willen's farm, shine in Jerusalem's pleasant sight. This still partly rural London, which is also where Jerusalem might be, not in the past, but in the present or the future. And the very ending of that poem, which passes from the same kind of indictment of possessive and prohibitive values to that alternative. A man's worst enemies are those of his own house and family, and he who makes his law a curse, by his own law shall surely die. In my exchanges, every land shall walk, and mine in every land mutual shall build Jerusalem, both heart in heart and hand in hand. This, of course, is a millennial vision which he shared with others at his time. It's rather like the most famous of all of them, you know, and did those feet in ancient time, which, of course, is also a little poem that is put into Jerusalem. But how do you square this millennial feeling which he has at one time with this appalling sense of Babylon and destruction on the other? This is a much larger question about Blake, or whether we're looking at 2 Blakes, one who's changed from his early days. Has anyone got a feeling about this millennial note that you get in Blake sometimes? Is he a man who sees life as larger than it really is, either in an apocalyptic sense or in a utopian sense?
Presumably he lived in an age of revolution.
Yes.
And would, certainly in writing these poems we've been considering, think of the French Revolution as with some pleasure, I suppose.
Yes.
And certainly, obviously, in the fragment you read about the American Revolution, obviously, and the